Hi, I'm Paul Astles, a learning designer at the Open University in the STEM faculty.
Hi, I'm Katrina Matthews, a learning designer at the Open University, also in the STEM faculty.
Welcome to our online presentation. Read all about it, the benefits and challenges of creating a high-quality open access blog.
Before we get into the presentation, we wanted to give you a heads up that there is some audience participation at the start of this talk. All you need to do is have your phone or smart device ready to scan some QR codes when we guide you to.
If the audience interaction fails spectacularly, don't worry, it's only a bit of fun anyway. Note, if you are not watching this talk live, the question element will no longer be functional. But don't worry, you can still engage with some QR codes at the end of the presentation, whether you're with us live or connecting to the recording later.
Learning design at the Open University is made up of 3 service areas. These are evidence-based, designing experiences, and working together.
Each of these service areas is broken down into a series of well-defined services. For example, within designing experiences, we support colleagues with student journey planning sessions. In short, this is a way to storyboard the design intention of the experience that a student may have within their learning journey.
This student journey process helps to provide opportunities to explore where specific support in the design process may be required. Another purpose of the service model is to help us evaluate and continually develop our approaches. The services also help to provide a network of peer support for LD colleagues, so they can in turn provide world-class design support for our colleagues and stakeholders.
Now, here is your audience participation warning. If you're watching this live with us at the OER conference, can you please get your devices ready? We're about to ask you a couple of questions.
And for those of you watching the recording of this session, hello. You won't be able to engage in this section of audience participation, but you can enjoy the next few moments, as it will either work really well or not at all. And if you wanted, you can pause the video and skip ahead a few minutes, where you'll find a QR code that links you to the blog site. Scan that and keep it safe, and then come back here and pick up the talk from where you left off.
So just like we do with our blog posts, we're going to ask you, the audience, to consider and reflect on these questions to promote some engagement and interaction. With your devices, please can you either scan the QR code in the box that says Scan Me, and it will take you to the page where you can answer these questions, or go to menti.com and enter the code at the top of the screen, the 8-digit code 74381264.
We can allow up to 2 minutes per question for you to answer, so take some time and consider what your response is going to be. There'll be a timer on the screen to show you how long is left, and while you're thinking about your responses, we'll read out the questions and provide some of our own experiences as well. So, question 1. Have you ever adapted your practice after reading a blog post? So in terms of my experience, I think I fall mostly into the intend category. I find that blog posts normally kind of inspire me to look further into areas that I'm interested in, or a starting point of more research, but it doesn't necessarily lead me to change my practice straight away. Sometimes I need a little bit more time to look into things and talk to colleagues and find more scholarship. I think recently I did some looking into mental health and well-being and considering how I changed my practice to support others and how to help others change theirs. And so it's kind of been a good space to think about things a little bit more. Okay, only 5 seconds left on the timer. So voting's now closed, and we can move on to question 2, which Paul will be leading.
Excellent, thank you. So this question asks, have you ever discussed the content of a blog with a colleague? I'm going to pop another 2-minute timer on the screen. And there we go. So my experience with this question in particular is similar to the response that has come through on the screen. So I have discussed the content of a blog post with a colleague. In my context, it was in a mentoring capacity. So the blog post on our Open University's Learning Design blog site about reflection as a CPD tool is something that I used to help reflect with a colleague who was new to the role of learning designer at the OU, and as part of my discussions we were reflecting on ways in which learning designers can consider the quality of sessions that they run with colleagues and the quality of the experience that is had in those sessions, and reflection and reflective tools came up as part of that discussion, and we discussed what was written in that blog post, and it helped frame our discussion and thoughts, and my colleague then went away to consider how to apply that. So there's around 30 seconds left of the voting time, and I'll just let that time close out before we move on. And as the timer dwindles down, I just wanted to thank you for your input and your responses there. It's been really interesting and helpful to consider how you yourselves have interacted with blogs. And now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about our own blog. But first, if you're interested in exploring the blog whilst you listen along to the next section of our talk, please follow the QR code that's on the screen now. It will take you to the site and you can click around at your leisure whilst we guide you through.
We'd love to hear about how you may use the content of our blog site to develop your practice. At the end of the slides, there is another QR code you can scan which will link you to a form that prompts you to tell us all about this. Before we talk about the Learning Design blog specifically, we'll give a quick overview of what makes a blog a blog. Baxter pulls together the salient characteristics of a blog within the diagram recreated on the slide. These are community-driven, reflective dialogue, information sharing, and management of content.
The Learning Design blog, like other blog sites that exist, conforms to these characteristics in some way. Throughout the presentation, the way that we talk about the blog can be directly linked to this underpinning framework.
And now it's time to properly introduce you to our Learning Design blog. First of all, let's look at the audience of our blog. We're going to provide you with a non-exhaustive and purposely broad list of the people that make up the audience of the blog.
Visitors and users of the blog and its resources can be teams supporting the design and production of modules at the Open University. So for example, our editorial colleagues who are both audience and contributors. A little later in the talk we'll be exploring that group in a bit more detail within our Communities of Practice section.
Other learning designers, both within the Open University Learning Design team and external to our team, and a little later we'll be talking about some data from the OU Learning Design Twitter account as a way of contextualising how our external audience is connected with.
And finally, anyone interested in learning design and pedagogy. That's right, we're keen for our content and resources to be adopted and used by anybody interested in learning design and pedagogy. We share any resource that is on our site with a Creative Commons license so that they can be used freely. The authors of a blog post can be anyone in the OU Learning Design team. We actively encourage any member of the team to contribute to the blog. There is a backlog that is joined when a new blog author identifies their desire to contribute, and this provides time and space to create the post and reflect on the guidance provided to our authors, and more on that a little bit later.
We've also collaborated with other experts and colleagues outside of the team too. An example that we'll be exploring with this approach a little later relates to a blog post written by a colleague about working practices between learning design and editors at the OU. The platform the blog is hosted on is WordPress, and we have our own server. The blog was established in 2018, and since then we've amassed blog posts and open access resources on a broad range of topics.
And we also use Twitter and Yammer to promote and share blog posts. These platforms help us to better connect with a wider audience of interested parties. The content and focus of the blog is to provide examples from our own practice, share overviews of current topics of interest, and to update any of the open access resources housed in the resources section.
The OU Learning Design team are very active when it comes to scholarship. The blog site plays an important role in capturing and sharing progress with some of our scholarly outputs. This may be relating to specific projects, such as the update to the activity types taxonomy, and it may be that the blog post itself is the output of the scholarship, such as the post related to using reflection as a daily CPD task.
Hopefully, this brief introduction to the blog site has provided enough of an overview for you to better understand what the purpose of the blog is. And next, we will start to consider some of the benefits and challenges related to using an open access blog. Before we get into that, we wanted to remind you that at the end of the presentation, there is an opportunity to navigate to and explore our blog site, if you haven't already, and its resources.
We'll be encouraging you to connect with us about the content of the blog and how you might use it within your own practice. As we go through the next few slides, please consider if any of the content we mention piques your interest. If so, go and read the full article and consider how to develop your own practice as a result, and most importantly, tell us how that works for you.
Baxter also provides a really useful framework to help approach the implementation of a blog. What you can see on screen is an adaptation of the Baxter guidelines for implementing an organizational blog. We follow this process to ensure that the Open University Learning Design team curate a high-quality open access blog.
Our approach is slightly adapted from the original process outlined by Baxter. For us, planning involves defining the purpose of a potential blog post and agreeing on a timescale for it to be produced.
Support, development and implementation of a blog post on the site is provided in various ways to blog creators, and we will explore what that looks like in our context on the next few slides.
Keeping things current and posting regularly is a real challenge. On the slide are some of the ways that we attempt to tackle this. One of the most valuable ways of keeping content flowing are informal blog champions within the LD team. They help to drive new content and keep an eye on the validity and authenticity of current information and resources.
In order to ensure a level of quality control within the site, we have a peer review process prior to publication of any blog post, along with a template guide. This helps to ensure a consistency in approach. It allows content creators to ensure their voice is unique in the narrative they create, whilst conforming to a style that allows each post to feel connected with the identity of the blog.
We also have a system that ensures a single point of contact in charge of maintenance and uploads. This helps to reduce the chance of errors creeping in to how and when articles are published.
When it comes to the resources, we update this section on an as and when basis. We have, at the time of writing this, 38 resources on the site. These are present as a way of providing tools for our audience to use and adapt for their practice. As you can probably imagine, it can be time-consuming to ensure that they're updated so that visitors to the site are not accessing out-of-date content.
Changes to the resources can be driven by a range of factors. A specific example of this is when updates to the activity type taxonomy drove the need to update resources related to that taxonomy. For example, we had to create and upload an updated activity planner as an editable PDF, which you can see a picture of on the screen. We also archived some resources relating to the previous taxonomy.
Updates to resources are also driven by accessibility requirements. As guidance changes, we review resources to ensure that they meet the necessary guidelines.
We felt it would be useful to consider here what makes a community of practice before we talk you through some of the examples of how the blog helps to create communities of practice within the OU, as well as communities of shared interest external to the OU, which are related to the topics that we post on the blog site.
A community of practice has been defined as a group of people who share a concern, a set of problems, or a passion about a topic, and who deepen their knowledge and expertise in this area by interacting on an ongoing basis. The three factors which make a community of practice are a domain of knowledge, community, and practice, and you can see these on the right hand side of the screen.
It is the creation of resources and other additional actions by members of the community, in this instance off the back of blog posts, that makes the blog a community of practice rather than simply a community of interest.
Let's look at the first example of how internal communities of practice have been supported by blog engagement. This example outlines how the blog helped to initially spread the word about the pilot outcomes of a new way of working between learning design and digital development editors, or LDs and DDEs. The blog was circulated and reflected on as the process of using the LD-DD document was being rolled out.
This culminated in a reflective CPD event looking back at the success of the process. Built into the event in February 2023 was a review of the practice outlined in the blog. The blog post itself was directly linked back to and used as a springboard for discussion and review. The outcomes of this event will then feed into next steps for the continued engagement in the use of this form.
Example number 2. This is related to sustainability and how work has grown in this area following the publication of a blog post.
So in January 2023, a colleague created a post about sustainability, challenging the reader to become engaged in the conversation on this subject. A Yammer post quickly followed to publicise the blog post within the Yammer community at the OU. This led to the formation of a sustainability working group and several networks being developed through contacts made as a result of engagement with the blog and Yammer post.
The working group have developed several resources which have led to conference submissions and a soon-to-be-released blog post to act as an update and point of reflection to further support work within this community of practice.
One of the benefits to using an open access blog is being able to interact with an audience outside of the OU. As you can see from the screenshot on the slide, Our Learning Design Twitter account engagement rate is consistently very high, and it's commonly accepted that an engagement rate in excess of 0.33% is considered high. We have selected 3 examples to share on the screen of Twitter engagement with posts related to blog content. It's one of the main ways we are able to share to a wider external audience.
We don't consider this external engagement a community of practice yet, as we do not have the creation and collaboration on actions and resources needed, but this provides a context for how we engage with and promote external communities of interest. However, we do get interaction in the form of comments about the blog on Twitter. For example, not long after we tweeted about this very talk, a retweet stated how much our blog is valued, reflected on, and indeed shared wider by our Twitter audience as part of specific reflective activities.
In an ideal world, we would also share with you some data from engagement with our blog as well. Unfortunately, we've been having some issues with Google Analytics on the page, and we're still in the process of addressing this. However, we are able to acknowledge that our blog posts do garner community comments. These represent shared experiences of the blog post content and how it relates to the reader's lived experiences.
It helps us to see how our audience interact with and digest the content. We promote this type of interaction through the template used for our blog posts. It encourages the author to ensure a key takeaway for the reader is present, challenging them to reflect on what they have read. Here we are sharing a series of benefits and challenges taken from the literature. They are represented here as they represent our experiences also. These are not the only benefits and challenges by any means, but they represent a useful place to start if you are considering the use of an open access blog in your own practice. You can see a full reference list at the end of these slides.
Benefits of using an open access blog include, but are not limited to, what you can see on the screen. We have first-hand experience in each of these factors and have discussed aspects of each in previous slides, for example about how we create opportunities for communities of practice within the OU and connect with a wider external audience also.
The challenges you can see on screen are unfortunately also a shared experience. It is important to recognise that creating, using and maintaining an open access blog space is not always plain sailing. However, being aware of some of these challenges can help us to work towards negating the impact that they could have. An example of a challenge that we've overcome with our blog site is the recruitment of colleagues to create content. We found the best approach to overcoming this challenge was through informal blog champions, the very same informal blog champions that we spoke about a little bit earlier. If you're interested in exploring the blog, please follow the QR code that has the Learning Design logo in the middle of it. If you can see the colours okay, it's the one next to the dark blue arrow that says scan, and if interpreting colours is more tricky for you, it's the one at the top of the slide.
We'd love to hear about how you may use the content of our blog site to develop your practice. If you're happy to provide us with some feedback, please use the QR code at the bottom of the screen. That is the one next to the orange arrow that says scan.
Thank you for listening and engaging with our talk at this year's OER conference titled Read All About It, the Benefits and Challenges of Creating a High Quality Open Access Blog.
We'll be happy to answer any questions within the Discord channel, and we look forward to hearing about how you connect with and use our blog content. We'll pause here for a few minutes to give you a chance to scan the codes, and if you're watching the recording, you can always pause the video. We will then pop up a reference slide in a moment for the benefit of the recording too.